I felt like expressing myself and trying to be not promote being a jerk, but just tell you how I really feel. I was watching Chris Date talk about the John 6. He's still going right now, actually, Theoapologetics, talking about white versus flowers. And I was so pleasantly surprised to find him saying what I was saying. And I'm proud of that someone smart says something that I think and have the same conclusion, trying not to be too ideological. I think I can honestly say that I understand that he's saying this, which I agree with. And that is, ultimately, he's coming around to the means by which they couldn't believe in John 6. In other words, it doesn't prove unconditional election. But like I said, if we're honest with the text, it does not disprove Calvinism. Just because John 6:44 doesn't prove unconditional election or total inability or any of the other part of tulip, it doesn't establish it. It doesn't disprove it either. If you're honest about what it says, it doesn't demand it. And that's why James White lost the debate, because the proposition of the debate was, does it teach unconditional election in John 6:44? And the answer is no. You can't establish it there. It's built. Your presupposition informs your interpretation, which you can make a case for, but it doesn't. Even the immediate context doesn't disprove unconditional election. It just doesn't establish it, and that's why James White couldn't win the debate. It's not possible. You couldn't prove. You can win a debate for other reasons, but not by demonstrating. The verse can't demonstrate either view is established there. That has to be argued for by context, and even then, more context. And I'll tell you this: ultimately, you can't prove how causation exactly works. We don't know. We never will. So sorry, that's the reality of it. The sooner you come to that realization with me, the easier it'll be to interact with people, in my opinion. We all want to make the case that our view is right and that the text is teaching our view. And I think you can make a great case that the particulars of Calvinism are not being asserted by the intent of the author, okay? But you can't prove it. The text demands it because it's just not possible. As much as I think the intention of the writer says so, I'll just have to live with that for various reasons, and you have to make that decision, and that's your decision to make. And you're not a Christian or not based on that decision. By the way, propositional assertions that can't be proven from the text will never, that alone, that proposition of affirmation will not demand or not whether you're a Christian. So I think the right way to read the Bible is not as a Calvinist, but Calvinists can be Christians. Sorry, it's just the way it is. I don't think they have the whole truth. I think my version of Christianity is the whole truth, more so at least. I mean, not that I personally know everything, but the framework of the great controversy and the battle between good and evil and the necessity of free will and what's going on in the text with the spiritual battle makes the most sense. I think it's the only theodicy that really makes sense and is an answer to what's going on in the text. And that incorporates all sorts of different aspects from other versions of Christianity that you could put together as a framework. But it's its own thing, and it shares explanatory power with other views in various ways, including Calvinist variations of certain texts and understanding. So I don't know. Who cares? Second, so that's how it is. You can't prove it, so that the arguments will go on and on. Let's see. So that was fun. So I think it's right. I think that John 6:44 does not and cannot prove Calvinism or non-Calvinism. But if someone tries to assert that John 6:44 demands Calvinism, they're wrong. Okay. And if someone says, therefore, non-Calvinism is true, that's not true either. But then, see, me saying that doesn't mean I'm saying Calvinism is true. I don't think it is. But being honest requires you to admit things like God being all in all, that verse by itself, is compatible with universalism. Does that mean I think universalism is true? No, I don't. And so that's the difference? Being honest with the text. It's not honest to say a given text isn't compatible with a particular view by itself. Every verse of the Bible doesn't prove or teach every tenet of the Christian religion. So proving a verse doesn't teach this or that doesn't mean that view is wrong. It means that verse doesn't teach it or demand it by the way it's written. Okay, so what's my other thing? Okay, Kelly Powers is doing a thing on hell. And look, Judas, it'd be better that Judas was never born, does not prove eternal conscious torment. It's ridiculous. It doesn't matter if people are annihilated and they won't remember it. Some to everlasting life and some to everlasting contempt does not require the people remembered in everlasting contempt to have consciousness forever. It just means their legacy is remembered contemptuously. The memory of them is remembered contemptuously. It doesn't require the person who's thrown into hell to be consciously aware that they're lost forever. But again, Kelly Powers is reading that verse in such a way that he's not recognizing, like the thing I was just talking about. Asserting something is demanded by the text when it absolutely logically is not a good way to teach the Bible. Okay? And so you can parade what I'm saying around as a fool because you're not getting it, or you can stop and consider it. I'm not saying therefore my view is correct because it says everlasting contempt doesn't have to mean eternal conscious torment, because it doesn't. In no way it demands it. It just demonstrates someone's limited willingness to consider what words mean. Okay, and I'm not mad. I know I'm right about that. But again, that doesn't mean my view is right, even though it is. Okay, about the nature of hell is where it gets dangerous in Stent's conversation. Is assuming a verse demands something it does not demand. And you're unwilling, anyone's unwillingness to be honest with that stunts the ability for people to have meaningful conversation and growth regarding what the text is saying. You don't have to be so open-minded you never believe anything, but you should be honest with the text. That's the point. Admitting that your narrow way of reading something wasn't correct doesn't mean your view is wrong. It just means you weren't being honest with what the words mean. Other verses are stronger at suggesting certain views probably aren't right, of course. Let that stand. But Judas, it'd be better for Judas if he was never born. Is because you don't have to be suffering. So it's like, it can be that we know who Judas is because he's the guy who betrayed Jesus. So he's remembered as the betrayer of Jesus. That's all we know about the guy practically. That's worse than, say, a neutral life that no one remembers. He's remembered as something which is only about betraying the Son of God who saves the world. So his legacy is that of the betrayer of the one who brings salvation. That's what it means. Now, of course, if he was to be tortured forever, that would also be a reason to think it would be better that you were never born. But it's not the only kind of reason that someone might say that. And if you look at the cultural context, people were very concerned with what their legacy would be. You could also argue that in the Old Testament, a lot of people weren't exactly sure. It was just kind of developing in that time before Jesus showed up, the idea. But in the text of the Old Testament, there's really no idea about eternal life yet. It's just temporal life. And the Sadducees reflect that. So if kind of the mindset of culture is that what you do in this life is how you're remembered. If you do something really terrible and then you die, and then from there on, your legacy to the rest of the living world is that you, for that thing you did that was terrible, that is a way of being worse off than if you had never been born, because then you don't even have a legacy. But if all you have for a legacy is that you're that guy who did that thing that's everybody detests, that statement applies to you. It'd be better if you were never born, right? And that is the case. But again, remember, It's also true that if he was to be tortured forever, that would be a reason to think that. That's not wrong. It just doesn't mean that that's the only reason to make a statement like it'd be better if you were never born, depending on how literal you take that. But even if you take it like ultra literally, our Western mindset doesn't even realize that. So no, that absolutely does not prove eternal conscious torment, because it'd be better if he was never born. I mean, if that's the kind of statement you're going to say, then when Jesus says, he who hates his brother is in danger of Gehenna, that means Jesus is saying people, he's talking to brethren there. Then once saved, always saved is false too, I guess, right? Or it'd be better than entering hell. I mean, so when Jesus says it'd be better to enter heaven maimed than to go into hell whole body, that sort of thing, it's like, does that prove hell too? No, because the destruction is permanent. So whatever it takes, get into heaven, whatever it takes. Because in the end, if you don't get in, it's worse off. You're worse off. Okay. I think that's it. So I just want to have an honest conversation with people. A lot of people think that they're stop and think. I'm just kind of irritated because it's like, look, I don't want to give the impression to people when I have conversations with them that I'm open, like I'm weak in my views and I'm coming to change my mind. I also don't want to have to. I'm also not trying to sneak in and and be belligerent with my views. I want to have honest conversation, but I don't want to give the impression that I'm impressionable. I'm very set in my ways. I think I'm right, but I want to have a good conversation. So, honest conversation, and be okay with the fact that someone's not going to change their mind. But I don't want to give the impression that I'm I'm soft to be torn open or whatever, change my mind. I doubt it. But anyway, that is what it is. I was hoping to have honest conversation with Kelly, but I also don't want to give the impression that I'm changing my mind or something about what I believe. I'm not coming at it like that either. I'm also not trying to be sneaky or something, which people accuse me of all the time. I just want to have honest conversation with other people who love Jesus and love the Bible, and be a better example for good dialogue. That's what I'm looking to do.